All right, so this meeting is being recorded. Well, I can go through, Tim, if it's all right, I'll just go through kind of the introductory housekeeping stuff, and then I'll turn it over to you. So welcome everyone to our Municipal Town Hall meeting. Thanks for joining us. My name's Dan Clark. I'm the director of the Local Government Center. We're hosting this on the technology side, partnering with the Montana League of Cities and Towns, bringing to you the folks from the National League of Cities and Towns to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act. I think I got that right. Just as a reminder, for some of you that may not be familiar with the WebEx platform, it's similar to Zoom if you're familiar with that, but on the bottom of your screen, there's buttons that you can mute yourself or unmute, show video or not show video. And if you'd like to ask any questions, if you look on your far right, there is it looks at my screen, it's orange with a little caret next to it. You can click on that and it'll bring open a chat box. So if you have a question or a comment during the presentation today, feel free to type in your thoughts or comments or questions, and we will try to get to them as quickly as possible. Another option for you is you can hover over your name on the right-hand side where it has participants, and you will find a little hand. A hand will open up and will allow you to, if you press on that, raise your hand. That will indicate to us that you've got a question, and then we'll go ahead and call on you to ask your question over the WebEx platform.
Got it.
If you're not speaking, if you could please mute your computer or mute yourself so you're not disrupting the process. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mute everyone. And then when it's Tim's opportunity to speak, I think you can then just go ahead and unmute yourself, Tim. I hope this will work. All right. So Tim, all right. So hopefully it's all working well. I didn't mess things up, but we're super happy that everyone's joined us here today. So I am going to turn the time over to Tim Burton, the Executive Director of the Montana League of Cities and Towns, to introduce our special guests.
Well, thank you, Dan. It looks like you have everything running just perfectly. And welcome everybody to, I don't know what number of town hall this would be, but to the Montana League of Cities and Towns in partnership with the Local Government Center's Town Hall. We want to focus our discussion, presentation, and questions on the ARPA funding that's coming down from Washington, D.C. And in that regard, we have a special guest today. He's in great demand all over the United States. And that's Mike Wallace with the National League of Cities. And Mike is here to give us an update on where we're at. And as we know in Montana, there are 3 entitlement cities, and there are 124 non-entitlement cities. So we're continuing to wait on the directives out of DC. But with that, Mike, I would like to turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us today. And it's probably only been a few days since we've last met.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you all again. This is a very exciting time. Just want to make sure, can you all see the slides that I just tried to share? They're great. Yep. Okay, so I'll flip through those. So you've seen a lot of these. Some of you have seen some of these before. If you've been on a prior league calls or National League of Cities webinars, but the big news is that late yesterday, Treasury published additional guidance for small local governments, the 120 some in Montana that are classified as non-entitlement units of local government. Those are the cities under 50,000 residents. So I'll share some new info there, but the long and short of it is that the publication really gives direction to the states for how to work with cities to suballocate those funds, what to ask from cities to ensure compliance with the federal legislation, and then an opportunity for cities um, to solve any unique state anomalies. But I'm happy to say Treasury has not encountered any unique state anomalies for the state of Montana, so it should be a really straightforward calculation and process. So what we're talking about, the universe of funds here is 65.1 billion for every municipal government that's over 19,000 cities, towns, and villages nationally, as identified by Treasury with the help of the census. That's a part of the 350 billion in total for all state, county, and municipal governments, and tribes and territories. So this is what we have to date. These are the source documents that we're working from to talk to you about the different spending opportunities and ways to help residents, ways to stabilize local government operations. So we've had access to the interim final rule for about 2 weeks now. The interim final rule really goes into detail about what's eligible spending and what is prohibited spending. And we continue to analyze that. We continue to get hundreds and probably thousands of questions regarding specific projects, and we are diligently working through those with the help of Treasury to make sure everything that we're asking about aligns with the intent of the bill. The new document is the guidance on distribution of funds to non-entitlement units of local government. That is available on the Treasury website now. Like I said, it's primarily instructions to the states, but it primarily concerns the funding for the small localities. So if you want to get some idea about what this Treasury is requiring of the states in order to meet their responsibilities to pass down the grants that you're entitled to under the bill, you'll find it there. If you want to see the source documentation, you'll find it there. There's also an frequently updated, frequently asked questions list. I know that document continues to be updated by the Treasury Department as they get sets of good questions that apply broadly. We have the allocations for metropolitan cities. So for the 3 cities over 50,000 in Montana, we have Treasury's provided the actual calculation of the grant amount that is coming to those cities. And those metropolitan cities, the big cities, may apply for those funds now through a portable at the Treasury website. And many of the larger cities already have access to the first tranche of their dollars. The Treasury Department has not provided a cash calculation of the grant amount to the small cities. What they've done is provided the overall amount of funding coming to all the small cities to split state by state. And they've provided a list of all the eligible units of local government on the municipal side for each state that they have identified with the help of census, along with the 2019 population of all of those cities. That is the most recent census data available, and that's specified by the legislation that Treasury is required to use the most recent census data available. And then the new document provides a formula to the states to allocate every dollar that they get for small towns by a simple per capita formula by population. So it's conceivable that you could take these different elements and calculate those yourselves, but I caution you, it's always best to wait for the official calculation from the person doing the allotting of the funds. So while we may be able to sort of do our own back of the notebook calculations, we really should wait for the states to do their own calculation and then do an analysis to make sure that that all the dollars are accounted for. But we have no reason to believe they wouldn't be. Let me go to the next slide here. So just in general, your funding is available to cities and towns in 2 tranches. This is also the case for most states and counties. So of the total grant you're entitled to, you can take 50% up front. So that's true for big and small cities. For the smaller cities, the state will be passing down to you half of what you're entitled to within 30 days. I think the shot clock started yesterday with the official publication from Treasury, but states may ask for an extension beyond those 30 days, and some we know are going to do that. But you'll get half of your dollars when the state can suballocate it, and then 12 months following that, you'll get the second half, and that's how the state's going to receive it too. When the state applies for the state dollars that they're entitled to, the state ARP grants, Treasury has said that application they're going to consider that application inclusive of the small city grants too. So the Treasury will send the first lump sum payment to the states for suballocation. They'll withhold the second half. 12 months after the state allocates the first half, Treasury will deliver the second half to the state for suballocation. So that's 2 years of funding certainty that you can know exactly how many dollars you're getting and build that into your budget in a very certain way. Like I said, we also know what kind of information you'll need to provide, and it's quite a bit of information for metro cities. You have to submit to the ID.me system. It's a federal system that asks some deep questions about identity, Social Security, that sort of thing. We've been told that Treasury does not, ID.me is a standalone verification system for the federal government. Treasury does not even really see the data that gets put into ID.me. That's an entirely different operation, but that's what they're going to rely on to track the users of these grants, or track who they can reach out and contact you in terms of the employment of these grants. For non-entitlement units of local government, we know that every city needs a DUNS number, and that's the number that tracks grants throughout the federal system. Every entity that applies for a federal grant needs a DUNS number. If you don't have one yet, simply go to grants.gov, and it's a prominent link right there. It'll walk you through the process to get assigned a DUNS number. There's additional information required of non-entitlement communities that you can find in the documents that were released yesterday. It's too new that we haven't been able to update the slide completely, but it does appear that small cities will also be required to have a SAMS number. Now, I can't tell you exactly what a SAMS number is, but we're working on that for our own FAQ. But this is just to say, even for small cities, there's going to be some process-oriented stuff in the beginning before you're going to be able to receive your grant dollars through the state. In terms of the eligible spending categories, that, like I said, that's in the first rule. That rule has the force of regulation right now. So although it's an interim rule, it is binding as right now. They in the interest of speed, did not go through the normal process where they had a proposed rule and then you could comment and then they issue a final rule. This rule has effect now. And we expect what will happen is that as we try to, and it's a pretty good rule, but as we try to change some things or get a reconsideration on a few things, because it's not a perfect rule from our perspective, we expect Treasury will issue rolling guidance like they did with CARES. So that although the rule as it stands is good now, we're seeking a little bit more flexibility in a couple areas, and hopefully Treasury will reconsider and work with us to provide some of those more flexibilities. But in general, what you're going to find is lists of allowable expenditures. There's probably 100 specific activities or more that are identified in the rule as things that are deemed eligible and that you could use right now to guide your spending of your dollars. Now, I will tell you right now, there's so many options to open to cities and towns on how they can spend these dollars. There's no way you could meet every single eligible expenditure, right? You couldn't prioritize every possible thing that you're allowed to do under this rule. So there will be some work for you to do along with your stakeholders and with community input to sort of prioritize the 5 or 6 or 10 items that you want to use these things for, the 5 or 10 public policy priorities you want to put your dollars toward. And that will help you cut through the clutter, and because there's so many options, it can quickly prove overwhelming. So just keep in mind what you want to do, and then go into the rule and see how the rule can support those outcomes, right? Some of the broad categories for spending: public health. You can there's specific activities under public health, direct aid, so cash assistance to residents who've been harmed by COVID, community economic development activities, and infrastructure activities. In addition to the allowable expenditures, there's a category of encouraged expenditures that are not that don't appear in the underlying bill, but fit within the administration's broader commitment to addressing racial equity. So categories for encouraged expenditures include activities that would address racial disparities, long-standing inequities, and communities that have suffered disproportionate harm. This does not have to be directly related to COVID. These are sort of long-standing systemic disparities that have perpetuated inequities in communities. So the way it encourages these expenditures is it creates sort of a safe harbor in what's called a qualified census tract. A qualified census tract is simply a census tract that's recognized for having a high concentration of poverty within it. It's useful for mapping out eligibility for things like low-income housing tax credits and other programs that serve low-income populations. The encouragement here is that if you do your spending within a qualified census tract, Treasury is going to deem that spending eligible and not require additional documentation from you from your spending activities within that census tract. So that's a significant. That's less overhead. Less administrative compliance. That's the incentive to spend within the qualified census tract. They also say within the rule that if you have an area of high poverty, or you have a community that's been historically neglected or disconnected, that's not in a qualified census tract, if you show that your spending was intended to improve the conditions of those specific communities, you also get that incentive. You also don't have to provide additional documentation. Can you spend in the same way outside of qualified census tracts? The answer is yes. But if you do it outside of the census tract, you will have to provide additional documentation and data showing that your expenditures achieved the kind of outcome you were seeking with those dollars. Lastly, there's prohibited expenditures, right? And those are we'll get to those later. The small list of prohibited expenditures that those are lines you cannot cross with these dollars. Lastly, just on this slide, if you have an expenditure, if you have a project you want to complete or a service you want to provide, and it does not appear as a pre-validated eligible expenditure within the Treasury rule, as long as you think it complies with the law, you can still do it. Treasury has provided a framework of questions for you to determine if that project or service is an eligible expenditure, because what Treasury's told us is they're not going to make a ruling on every single local project that comes across their desk. They don't have the capacity to do that. So if you want to be innovative and try to do something that's not necessarily contemplated by Treasury but fits within the legal authority of the bill, what you can do is identify the harmful effect of COVID. The activity will address, because Treasury wants your expenditures within certain categories to be directly connected to COVID-19, some harm related to COVID-19. Assess if it's a causal or compounding connection. So did the harm you're addressing get caused by COVID or measures to contain COVID, or did the harm you're addressing intensify as a result of conditions related to COVID? If you can assess for disproportionate impact on distressed sectors or populations, that will be further evidence that your spending is in compliance. Like I said, that's that incentive that Treasury is offering for encouraged expenditures. And lastly, determine how you're going to show with data and evidence that your expense produced the outcome you were seeking. If you can answer all those questions affirmatively and come up with a way to show that you did what you set out to do, then you can proceed. In terms of eligible expenditures, the bill has 4 categories of eligible expenditures. That's the COVID-19 public health response and economic harm response. That's one category. Spending for premium pay for essential work is a second category. Spending on replacement of lost revenues, the third category. And then necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband is the fourth category. Now, when you look at the 4 categories, each one of the categories within itself has different conditions. There's no single condition that applies across all 4 of these spending categories. So it gets a little bit complicated. The key here is that for every expenditure, you'll want to make sure that you've definitely associated that expenditure with one of the 4 categories. You do not have to spend in every category. If you want to spend entirely in one category, and you can do that, that's fine. If you want to do 2 or 3, you can. There's no requirement that you have to spend X dollars within each one of these particular categories. For the ineligible expenditures, just a short list here, you cannot spend your grant dollars on to satisfy federal matching requirements if the federal grant prohibits the use of federal funds for that match. So many times a federal grant requires a local match. That local match must come from locally derived revenue sources. And you cannot treat these grant dollars as if it were a locally derived revenue source if that's the requirement. You cannot use these dollars for premium pay for workers who are not frontline employees. So in general, if your employees do not have standard interaction with the public or do not handle items frequently from the public, if they're teleworkers, they do not qualify for premium pay. You cannot deposit these funds directly into a pension account to account for sort of longstanding debt there, but that doesn't matter for the cases of payroll. If you're using these dollars to pay the wages of an eligible employee, you may use these grant dollars to satisfy their benefits contribution too. So if a pension is part of their standard benefits package, you don't have to change this operating procedure. You can use these dollars to meet that standard benefit. You can't use these dollars for infrastructure that's not included already. So surface transportation and other infrastructure that's not water, sewer, or broadband is generally not eligible within the broadband category. But I'll tell you a little bit later, there's more flexibility in the replacement of lost revenue category. And then lastly, you can't put these dollars to build back your reserves. The Treasury has simply prohibited deposits of these funds into rainy day funds, financial reserves, or to pay off outstanding debt, existing bond payments, those sorts of things. We are going to ask Treasury to reconsider the blanket ban on putting dollars in the financial reserves, specifically if cities can show that they drew on their reserves as a result of unanticipated losses or unexpected expenditures related to COVID. That's a COVID-related expense, and the draw on the reserves is a material harm to cities who rely on their reserves for other emergencies, but also many times they rely on the reserves to maintain their bond rating. So right now, the case is you cannot put your dollars into reserves, but NLC is seeking reconsideration of that, and hopefully we can get some flexibility there from Treasury. Just quickly going through deeper into the eligible expenditures. This is a slide related to the public health response. You can use your dollars to respond to the public health emergency related to COVID-19. It's very flexible. So any manner of activity related to COVID-19 mitigation and prevention that includes expenditures necessary to help residents get to vaccination sites and improve your vaccination programs. We have a question into Treasury about if these dollars can support financial incentives for vaccination. So you see in some states, they've put together a lottery for people who are willing to get vaccinated or have provided U.S. savings bonds to a certain category of people who are hard to reach in terms of vaccinations. We're trying to get clarity from Treasury on if cities are eligible to do the same with these grant dollars. That's not addressed in the rule. You can use these dollars to help offset medical expenses of residents, including transportation costs, so ambulance rides, that kind of thing, if they have those costs related to harm from COVID. You can spend for behavioral health care, including addiction treatment. So the rule recognizes that because of quarantining and remote learning and remote working, There may be behavioral health issues cropping up in your community or certain parts of your community. You can use these dollars to address that. And if addiction has increased as a result of this, and we know it has in many places, addiction treatment and recovery is an eligible expenditure. You can use these dollars to pay the wages of public health and public safety employees. And again, these are employees who are interacting with the public regularly. These are not the administrative professionals who are back in the office supporting those employees. They have to be on the front lines. You can use these to address longstanding health disparities, provide survivor benefits, and then you can use these dollars to improve your data collection, your data analysis, your data systems, all in an effort to streamline and improve the execution of programs. It doesn't actually have to be limited to health programs. You can use these funds just for improvement of data collection and data analysis, and use that benefit really to help with the delivery of all the programs and services that you're providing. On the economic impact side, again, like I said, qualified census tracts. If you're going to be innovative with these dollars, I suggest you do it within a qualified census tract, because there's a little more cover within those qualified census tracts in the rule to do things that are a little bit further afield than just strictly related to harm related to COVID-19, because like I said, within a qualified census tract, you can spend in a way that addresses long-standing disparities and inequities. So some of the things you can do on economic harm, this again, a non-exhaustive list, provide direct cash and loan interventions to residents that have experienced setbacks related to COVID-19. This include, our understanding is this could even include piloting universal basic income type programs, but we're seeking more input from Treasury on where to even begin with something like that, should you want to get involved with that. You can provide direct assistance to your business community and your nonprofit community. So if you have a business that has been harmed by measures related to COVID, places like restaurants who lost businesses, or sports or entertainment venues, or commercial retail, main streets, for instance, if people had stay-at-home orders, you can provide grants and loans or forgivable loans, any manner of sort of cash assistance to those businesses. Or you can purchase protective gear or help them reconfigure their space, whatever it takes to reopen post-COVID. You can do the same for nonprofit institutions in your communities. You can provide assistance to impacted industries and workers. As one clarification here in terms of workforce development, you can use these dollars for workforce development for workers who've shown that they have been harmed by COVID. So they have to have shown that somehow they've lost work or lost wages as a result of measures to contain COVID. You can't sort of just park these dollars in a general workforce development program, a standalone program. You still have to show some connection to COVID-related harm here. For housing and community development, you can use these dollars to make rent payments and utility payments on behalf of residents who can't make those payments themselves. Generally, any resident that's at risk of becoming homeless because they can't make a rent payment or a mortgage payment, you can step in and provide some assistance so that they can make those payments. You can also use these dollars to address hunger issues, and you can use these dollars, the rule says, for affordable housing development. So if you have a vacant or abandoned property, a nuisance property, a problem property, you can use these dollars to acquire that property, as long as what you're doing is acquiring it to rehabilitate it and make it useful as affordable housing. Useful affordable housing has to be the end goal. The rule does not say cities may demolish homes with these dollars. So the idea here is they want these dollars to be useful for increasing the availability of affordable housing to the extent a city chooses to use it to that end. You can use these dollars broadly for homelessness and for child care and education. On the child care and education front, I would just say it's very flexible. We know that people won't get back to work if they don't have a safe place for their children to be while they're at work. So these dollars can both support the physical space of a child care provider, so help with the lease, help with getting the space up and running, and it can help supplement the wages of child care workers. On the workforce, on the premium pay category, this is a different spending category. The rule allows cities to provide premium pay to eligible workers. Premium pay is $13 over regular wages, or up to $13 over regular wages, I should say. You're not required to spend in this category, but if you do, it's pretty broad. So any public employee whose job brings them into contact with the public, or if you're contracting out for public services. So let's say you're contracting out your sanitation or something like that, you can transfer funding to the contractor with instructions to provide premium pay to their employees. And some of the qualified industries are shown here on the slide. So it's staff at nursing homes, hospitals, home care settings, anything involved in food delivery or production, farms, grocery stores, restaurants, your sanitation staff, truck drivers, transit drivers, warehouse workers, childcare, and really any manner of social services or human services staff, any staff that sort of intervenes in domestic situations on behalf of the city. This is another new category of spending. This is the water and sewer projects. Like I said, there's not a lot of flexibility outside of water, sewer, and broadband, but within those categories, there's a lot you can do. So Treasury has considered water and sewer broadly to include things like waste runoff, water runoff, and protection of waterways as part of water sewer project possibilities. In general, it lines up with existing federal programs. So if you have a project that would qualify under the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, you can also use these grant dollars for those purposes. As to say here, you know, in most cases, a big water project has several sources of funding. Although you cannot use your grant dollars to pay down debt. So you couldn't like take out a bond to finance the entirety of a project and then use these dollars to pay off that bond. You can still complement these dollars with bond financing. So if there is a gap or parts of the project that you want to pay with these dollars that are separate from your bond dollars, you can make this program work together under that. You just can't use these dollars to pay off the bond directly. You can file for cybersecurity. So if your city or town, you know, we've seen the hackers taking over city websites and the pipeline recently. If you want to upgrade your systems to protect it for cybersecurity, these dollars are useful for that. And it's useful for any manner of lead remediation. So lead service lines, lead paint remediation, all that sort of thing. Under the broadband, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I'm just going to cop to it that I'm not the expert on the broadband category, but the goal here for this expenditure is to connect neighborhoods that largely are disconnected from high-speed internet. Right now, the standards are pretty low, so it would mean you know, providing hotspots or more sort of temporary access to high-speed internet. We are asking Treasury to improve the standards and make things more flexible for localities so that cities that want to truly build out physical transmission of broadband can permanently or in a lasting way connect those communities that currently don't have access to high-speed internet. And the last category, lost revenue. This is the most flexible spending category in the rule, and that's because lost revenue category, anything that you spend on out of your general fund will be eligible in the lost revenue category, as long as it's not one of those 5 or 6 prohibited expenditures I talked about earlier. To figure out, now you can't channel all of your funding directly into lost revenue. You actually have to calculate a finite amount of lost revenue related to COVID harm. Treasury provides a calculation, and MLC has put on its website a online calculator. So all you have to do is plug in your total budget revenue from the fiscal year prior to the coronavirus emergency. The calculator assumes a 4.1% growth rate as the rule requires, and then it calculates the amount of revenue. The amount of funding you can spend on lost revenue year by year, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. Once you've determined how much total lost revenue you're allowed to spend, you can generally treat those dollars like they're general fund dollars. So even though you can't do surface transportation under the infrastructure category, if you have a line item in your general fund for surface transportation, filling potholes, repaving, whatever, and you have calculated lost revenue, then you can use your grant dollars for that surface transportation purpose, for instance, as long as you're spending within the lost revenue category. So that's the most flexible category, but there's a limit on the amount of funding you may spend sort of within that category. Oh, let me go forward here. So because the grants are, it's a big opportunity, there's a lot of responsibility, and there's some reporting requirements. Generally speaking, the larger the city, the more onerous the requirements, the smaller the community, the less onerous it is. So for the small cities and towns under 50,000, you're going to have to report annually. Cities, biggest cities over 250,000, they have to report quarterly and file an additional report similar to what a CDBG grant requires in terms of who has benefited from the spending. So you'll see here, all cities have a deadline for their first reports. For the interim report, that's August 31st, 2021. That's for the larger cities. For cities that had to report quarterly, their first reports due October 31st, 2021. And then for the largest cities, their first report will be July 31st, 2021. So I know that didn't sound very, I know I wasn't entirely clear on that front, but just take a look at the slide there, and NLC will be publishing more one-pagers on exactly what the requirements for small cities are under this category. So you may file written comments on the interim rule if there's an expenditure you want to make, if there's something in the rule that's serving as an obstacle to spending in a way you think would address COVID harm. You can submit a comment at the Treasury website. It doesn't have to be long. The Treasury's going to get thousands of comments, so this could be a half page, a single paragraph. Just get right to the point. If you're going to submit comments on the rule to Treasury, we hope you will CC NLC with the advocacy@nlc.org email address, because if it's important enough for you to send the comment in, we want to make sure we're tracking it so that our comments are also reflective of your concerns. We are going to submit detailed comments to Treasury. Among the items we are asking Treasury to address, we want them to be more transparent in their calculations so that cities know exactly what calculation is behind the figure of their total grants amount, whether they're a large city or a small city. We want them to provide greater flexibility in the broadband category and in terms of public utilities. So for purposes of calculating your total revenue loss, you don't have to only rely on your general fund. If you have an enterprise fund or other accounts that's sort of underlying city services and projects, you take the sum total across all those categories to calculate that. But it says that if you own a utility, for municipally owned utilities, you cannot count the revenue and expenditures for those utilities within your overall calculations of your budget. We're telling Treasury that due to the coronavirus and other factors, in many places, cities that own their own utilities, in fact, those utilities are subsidizing the general fund more so than the general fund subsidizing utilities. So in those cases, the utility really is part and parcel of the services and that cities provide to residents. And so there should be greater flexibility there. But as of right now, you cannot count municipally owned utilities in your budget calculations. This is just the website where you can go and find the source documents I was talking about. If you have a question I can't answer, that's not answered in the frequently asked questions, that doesn't appear in the rule, you can send that question to the email address on this slide, slfrp@treasury.gov. It is the primary account that Treasury maintains and watches for questions from grantees from the state and local fiscal relief fund. If you submit a question through there, you're going to get a boilerplate response, just letting you know that the email went through. If you have a pressing need for clarity on some issue and you're not getting a response through this website, that's when NLC can be helpful. If you have a pressing need or urgent concern that we think would be common to lots of different cities, we try to help break through the clutter and get those kinds of things directly to the attention of Treasury officials. This is what's available on NLC's website right now. We have 5 fact sheets up right now that go into reporting requirements, how to receive funds, what is required of states, prohibited uses, all those sorts of things. If you don't want to read the source documents, go to NLC's website, find these one-pagers. We are finalizing one-pagers on the expenditures too, although we continue to analyze the rule and think of innovative ways cities can use those funding. We also have a number of blogs related to specific outcomes. So if your city wants to, for instance, prioritize supporting food access and jobs, we have a blog on steps and principles for that. If you want to prioritize supporting early childhood education, prioritize economic mobility for distressed residents, focus on mental health and well-being, a close look at broadband, focus on rental assistance. If any of those things resonate with you, like I said, you're not going to be able to prioritize everything with these dollars, but if any of these policy priorities sync up with what your city is trying to accomplish, NLC's these different blogs provide step-by-step guidance or principles for consideration as you set up these programs. And lastly, of course, if you want to get more involved with NLC, either because of the ARPA grants or otherwise, if you want to connect with city leaders from cities of similar size, but out of state and across the nation, NLC is here to help you do that. These are our regional coordinators. It's basically your NLC staff member. You'll see there Kirk Ross of the West Region is your NLC staff member if you want to need anything at all from NLC. And that's the end of my slide. So with that, I'm happy to use the remainder of the time to answer questions or just yield back to you guys.
No, Mike, this is Tim. I understand you have the ability to stay with us until around 2 o'clock.
Yep,
and
yep, no problem.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would like to talk just a little bit about the state of Montana programs for local government that passed in House Bill 632 this session. As you know, the state also set aside $150 million for direct allocation to cities and counties for sewer and water projects and broadband. That money will be split between cities and counties the same way that the gas tax is allocated, even though there's no relationship, they're just using the formula. So 68% of that $150 million will go to cities and towns, and 32% of that $150 will go to county governments. In addition to that, the state set aside an additional $250 million for competitive grant projects for sewer and water and broadband. And Anna Miller at DNRC is heading that up. She was unable to join us today because she's got a meeting up in the governor's office. But I know that they're working on the forms and the process of implementing that program as we speak. And in addition to that, we look at the pass-through distribution for the ARPA distributions for Montana cities and towns, and that pass-through process is being worked on and managed by Cheryl Gray at the Department of Administration. I've talked to Cheryl and her team on several occasions. Obviously, we're waiting for the final directives from Treasury and the allocation amounts. But it's my understanding that Cheryl is on the call. And Cheryl, if you'd like to speak about where you're at and where we're going with that distribution process, you're sure welcome to do so.
Greetings, everyone. This is Cheryl. Yeah, we just received the updated guidance last night, so it looks like we get to do some mathing and calculate the allocations, and so we'll be working on that. Of course, we'll be working with the budget office and with Mike Foster, who's heading up the ARPA for the state of Montana. There's a couple of forms that the federal government is requiring. There's some discussion or some language in there about if a NEU decides to refuse their money. So we're trying to get we need to read up on that. So I guess I will look to you, Tim, if you're aware, if there's going to be any situations of that nature. But we don't have the local government money yet in the state treasury. We did get the other money yesterday. And so once we get that money, we know that 30 days is, that starts the clock for us to get that money out. So we will have some information on our website that the local governments are used to going to, and then, but it will it'll probably be very similar to what's on your website, Tim, but it will mostly direct to the federal resources. So anyways, that's where we're at. We just got that information last night and we were so excited. We started reading through it, and but we've been like Tim said, we've been talking regularly and making sure we're on the same page there. So
Great. Well, thank you, Cheryl. And I would remind this group on the call too, that it was Cheryl and her team that put together the CARES Act reimbursement program that we all worked through last year. And they didn't get any new staff to do that. They built the program on the fly. I think they did a wonderful yeoman's job on behalf of cities and towns and counties in Montana. And I'd just like to thank you for all that hard work, Cheryl. And with that, Dan, I would turn it over to you and see if any of our members on the call have questions.
Thank you, Tim. So we have several questions in the chat box that I will read, and I don't believe these questions will show up in the recording. So I'll go ahead and read them into the record, so to speak. So we've got one question here. Does the new guidance cover any of the infrastructure funding that the state is managing and allocating? And I think that might go to you, Tim.
Yeah, so the distributions will be managed by the state, and that's where DNRC and Annie Miller are handling those two pots, the 150 million that will, by formula allocation, be distributed to cities, towns, and counties throughout Montana. And then the program requirements for the competitive side, which is an additional 250 million. And we can use your direct distribution on ARPA funds and couple that with the direct distribution you're receiving from the state, and also then that aligns you to be competitive using those funds on the 250 million as well.
Thanks. Another person wanted to know if the source document was issued yesterday, if we could get the link. And so someone has placed the link for the source document for the changes that were made or the update from yesterday on Treasury. So that's in the chat. You can go to there and get that. And I think this question is going to be for you, Michael. Is the slides going to be available? Can we could post those slides along with the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. I will. We'll make sure those are sent to the league right after this call.
Great. That'd be great. Thank you. Is there anything that towns are supposed to do or have done at this point to be able to receive money?
Yeah, there is a at the Treasury website, you will find a list of things cities should be, smaller cities should be doing now in order to prepare to receive that website. Those things are like things like making sure that you have a DUNS number from the grants.gov website. and making sure you have sort of identified who in your town is going to be chiefly responsible as far as Treasury is concerned. Who's the designated person for Treasury to get in touch with should they need to do that. The rule indicates that there will be a portal for small cities at the Treasury website, but it's not up and running yet. Right now, only the cities over 50,000 may actually go into a portal and complete their submission to gain access to their dollars.
Right.
I guess the one thing
This
to add to that is although the state, or I just say, although the state's allocating these dollars to you, Treasury considers every city and town the prime recipient of those dollars. So even though it's being sub-allocated through the state, every city and town, regardless of size, is ultimately responsible for complying with these rules and regulations. The state is not responsible for the spending being done by the cities and towns. So if you make an expenditure that runs afoul of the regulations or against the rules, it's your individual city that may be on the hook down the line, potentially years down the line, for repayment of those funds. So you want to keep that in mind. Just because it's coming through the state, you're still ultimately responsible for how those dollars are spent.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions that deal with the bonus payroll questions. One of the questions says, as part of the premium pay, can it be used as a bonus payroll to give employees a one-time bonus? And another question similar says, can the premium pay be retro in order to give bonus pay to employees that work through the pandemic?
Right. So pay is not eligible for every employee. The employee has to be a frontline employee that regularly interacts with the public. And so a bonus for everybody probably isn't an eligible activity. However, for eligible employees, public safety, public health employees, others on the front lines, the premium pay is retroactive to the beginning of the coronavirus emergency. So that's March a year ago.
Okay. A question dealing with affordable housing. Which definition of affordable housing are we using? And does this include workforce housing?
So the rule itself does not provide a definition. I think it is safe to say that affordable housing, as defined by HUD, would be the safe place to look. So that would be some percentage below area median income. So it just depends on what the area median income is and what the wages are considered workforce housing in your community. I think. Certainly, affordable housing would encompass low-wage workers, and in some instances, those might be considered workforce housing. But in general, when you think about affordable housing, it's something a step below, sort of what you might consider middle-class housing. But the HUD website would have a specific definition for you, and HUD has regional offices that every city may reach out to and get in touch with if they want a specific answer to that. If they want to know a specific income requirement related to affordable housing.
Okay. And here's another one on the housing front. It said, City of Missoula has a affordable housing trust fund. And so the question is, would a deposit into a city's affordable housing trust fund be considered a deposit to reserves?
I don't think so. I think you could park dollars in an affordable housing trust fund, but here's the catch. All dollars need to be obligated by the end of 2024 and spent by 2026 for all grant dollars. So you could not leave these dollars in a trust fund in perpetuity, and you would need to continue to keep track of the specific grant dollars you put into the trust fund so that you could let Treasury know that you have spent those dollars by the end of 2026. But otherwise, I think you can park it in a trust fund. You can put your dollars in an interest-bearing account generally. That's okay. You just had to make sure the dollars are spent by the end of 2026.
Okay. And Courtney Llewellyn, you had a question about $13 an hour, and I can't remember where that popped up in the discussion. Can you unmute yourself and clarify your question about the $13 an hour? Courtney, you still with us? If you joined us over the phone, you can hit *6, and that should unmute your phone. All right. Well, we'll move on, and hopefully you can unmute yourself and just kind of catch our attention, and we'll give you the floor to ask your question. Here's another question. Can the premium pay, oh, we already asked one. Is there a template document that we should use to file for funds?
Yeah, so when the portal for small cities comes online, that's essentially going to be the template. You know, it'll be an online template, but it'll be a portal, and it will step by step walk you through the information that it's seeking. We've asked Treasury to give us an advanced look at what exactly that's going to look like, so you can see it before you actually open the portal and officially begin the process. We also have an example of what the grant terms and conditions, the grant contract looks like for big cities. And so we've asked Treasury to tell us if it's going to be the same contract for small cities, or if there's going to be any differences. Would they share with us a sample for cities to see prior to finishing the process? So stay tuned for those. Hopefully we can get you an advanced look before you actually end up having to open things up.
Great. Another question, will the funds be subject to a federal audit?
They could be, and there is I forget what the trigger is, but there's a certain expenditure amount. If you hit it, if you spend X amount of federal dollars in a year, if a city does that, it automatically triggers an audit requirement from a firm that specializes in municipal audits. We're working in that space with auditors to try to figure out how onerous this is going to be, or you know, there is the potential here. We're trying to figure out basically if the country has the capacity, if the accountant industry has the capacity to do as many audits as probably might get triggered by this. So that work is ongoing. We're trying to figure that out now. But I believe one of our one pagers that goes into the how to access funds or how to report on funds has more information on that.
Okay. And then I think the question regarding the $13 an hour had to do with the premium pay. Someone wrote here, the ARPA recognizes this by definition premium pay to mean an amount up to $13 per hour in addition to wages or remuneration the worker otherwise receives in an aggregate amount not to exceed $25,000 per eligible worker. Do you have any other thought on that, Michael? Is that good?
No, the only other thing yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. You know, there is a cap on the total amount you can get. I saw one question in the box that was like, you know, we have front office employees who interact, I guess, probably with permitting or fees or that sort of thing with the public. In general, if a public employee has multiple duties, you can only use these dollars to supplement the part of their job that brings them into contact with public or requires them to handle goods from the public, right? So if it's split duty, part of the time is spent manning a front desk or being public facing, and then part of the time is behind the scenes. These dollars can only support the portion of the job or the part of the wages that support the responsibilities that bring the employee in contact with the public.
Okay. There's a question, the LWCF federal grant that these funds will be eligible to use to upgrade restrooms to better ensure public health. So Mayor
yeah.
Jones, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the states and localities, the federal government's granted the states and localities a fair deal of discretion in terms of what kind of projects qualify for LWCF for the that's the Land and Water Conservation Fund, I believe. And so, like I said, you know, as long as it's an act, something that would be approved, you know, as that would be approved activity according to the state, it would be approved here. So Treasury has given us a little bit, not a complete 100% clear answer on this, because I guess there's certain state by state differences on what's eligible or ineligible. Treasury did not want to be in a position to overrule those or get involved in what those might be. So that's why they've sort of settled on if it's eligible under the state rules, it's eligible here too.
Okay. And looks like the final comment says $750,000 is the trigger amount, or I guess it could be a question. Is it a trigger amount for governments to receive a single audit?
That sounds right to me. You know, there's yeah, it could be. I mean, I have no reason to think otherwise. That probably is the 750,000. If you spend more than that, you'll be subject to the single audit requirement. This is probably a good time just for a reminder that the law says that grants to small localities, those under 50,000, cannot be larger than amount equal to 75% of your pre-pandemic budget. We have not been able to really do an analysis of this, as we haven't seen the grant calculations for the small towns to know if that's generally an amount that small cities might hit. But I will say that our sample analysis, sort of doing some calculations for 3 or 4 states, has shown that it's a common outcome for the grant amounts to be a little bit higher for the small cities than they were in the congressional estimates. I don't know if that's going to hold true for every state or across the entire country, but that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And so that means you could potentially hit that 75% cap, in which case, you know, even if your state, even if you were calculated amount was something like $750,000, if your budget is smaller than that, your annual budget smaller than that, you wouldn't receive that total amount anyway.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so Mayor Cole, is it likely or unlikely Treasury will issue guidance stating that payroll for police and fire personnel will be presumed to be eligible as COVID related as it did in the CARES Act?
Yeah, we believe that's the case right now. We believe, I think that's in the rule right now, and we can help you identify exactly where that is. But our understanding is that that is the case for ARP grants. If you want to pay the wages of public safety, police, fire, ambulance, that sort of thing, the rule allows you to assume 100% of their job is related to COVID, and you can pay the full salary.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Michael. Tim, do you have, I think we're just at time now. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to wrap things up, or any comments, Michael, you have before we finish?
Well, I'd like to thank Michael for his time, and we will continue to reach out and have these types of meetings as this program develops and evolves. And I think Kelly Lynch was on the line. I'm not sure if she had anything to add, Dan. Otherwise, for me, it's a wrap, and I just want to thank Michael for his time.
Great. I as well.
Yep.
Thank you, Michael.
Likewise,
We appreciate
thank you.
all the support. Yeah. And Kelly, how about you? You got any final words of wisdom?
All I have to say is thank you, Mike. You're the bomb.
Likewise. So thank you. I know it's a really big, you can sort of, at first it's a great opportunity, but I can see even through the screen the weight of the responsibility settling on everyone. It's a lot of responsibility that Congress is handing you, really, whether you needed it or not. So just know that MLC stands ready to help you in any way that you need.
Great.
Very good. Well, thank you. And I'd also like to thank Cheryl Gray for joining us this afternoon. That's it, Dan.
Great. Hey, thank you, everyone. As soon as we are done with this and the recording gets rendered and sent to me, I will forward it on to the league and we'll post it on our website. If you don't see it in the next couple of days, feel free to just email me if you want a link to the recording, and we'll get that sent out to you if it's not already on our website or on the league's website. But with that, we want to thank you for your time. We wish you good luck as you try to wrestle with this on the local level and try to convert this into making an impact in your communities. So with that, we will see you until the next time.
All right, thanks.